We will never turn our back on a single Scot.
We've got to wrestle with those challenges.
This is the same nonsense we have heard time and time again.
This is our country. Let's fix it together.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Planet Holyrood, the podcast all about Scottish politics. I'm Chris McCall. I'm the Deputy Political Editor at the Daily Record, and I'm standing in as host today while Paul Hutchin enjoys himself at the Edinburgh Fringe, where a future career as a stand-up comedian surely beckons. Joining me on a very warm day in Glasgow are three distinguished guests, all of whom are desperate to have their say about the only story in town. And I'm not talking about the publication of the annual Gers report. In no particular order, we have Ben Borland, the editor of the Scottish Daily Express, Mark Smith, the head of news at the Daily Record, and John Ferguson, the editor of the Sunday Mail. Now, on Monday, we saw the publication, in Waterstones at least, of Nicola Sturgeon's memoirs after what feels like months of puff pieces, promotional interviews, and fawning profiles in the London press. Now, let's cut to the chase. Ben, was it worth the hype?
No, in a word. We were kind of taken by surprise by the Waterstones' decision to release it on Monday. We were expecting the book on Thursday.
Did you rush out to get a copy?
We did rush out to get a copy. We've got a copy in the Express news desk that's been passed around. So I won't sit here and say that I've read the whole thing. I've read a lot of it though, and I'm really not impressed.
There must be some standouts though for you.
The book. Again, I'm not sure this is what Nicola Sturgeon was going for, but we were literally in fits of laughter at the scene she claims happened after the 2015 general election.
Oh, I read this when she claimed it was Tom Harris, but it wasn't Tom Harris.
Well, it wasn't Tom Harris for one thing. And she walked through Glasgow airport and people ran out of the shops, ran out of the Wetherspoons, put down the pint and applauded and basically all but lifted her onto their shoulders and carried her triumphantly through the airport.
I mean, it was a very impressive election when at the time.
It was. I just don't think the airport. I just don't think that happened as she said. And we already know that she got the MP who was on the plane wrong. It was actually Jimmy Hood, the late Jimmy Hood, who can't corroborate any of this. But the plane burst into applause, and Jimmy Hood was all. It speaks to the streak in Nicola Sturgeon's personality that we saw on another election night when she celebrated so jubilantly when Joe Swinson lost.
I was actually standing next to her in that moment. Really? Yeah, if that clip had panned out 2 feet, you would see me and a very tired-looking Tom Peterkin standing extremely awkwardly. So I remember that well. Mark, how about yourself? What leapt out from the book for you?
This probably isn't what you just want to hear, but the main emotion I felt on reading the book and her interviews was pity. Most of us have our tattoo, confused sexuality, crying every 5 minutes phase before we hit our 20s. But it seems that Nicola's kind of hit that phase now. And it's tragic, really, that a woman that age is clearly having a bit of a nightmare personally. So I think rather than, there's a lot in the book that's revelatory, there's a lot in the book that's interesting. I think my overriding feeling is that she really is in a bit of a mess, and it's kind of a shame. However, my sympathy only extends so far because she's still getting it so tragically wrong on the trans issue. It's almost laughable. She says that some men shouldn't be allowed to be trans.
Forfeit the right.
Whereas previously she said all trans women are women and anyone who disagrees with that is a racist or akin to a racist. And now she's kind of adopted a similar position herself. It all just seems like a bit of a mess, and I think she seems like a bit of a mess. And I think the book is just a bit of a, as we predicted last week, and we feared it might be, it's just a massive big 400 pages of what a great person I am and what an idiot everyone else is.
Isn't that what we expect from celeb memoirs, though? There has to
I
be
would have hoped for
personal.
I would have hoped for just a smidgen of self-awareness on how she threw women under the bus, on how she screwed up any hopes we ever had of being an independent country, if that's the way your politics are. And she basically achieved very little as First Minister. A wee bit of self-awareness on that would have been welcome. Didn't see any of it, really. But as I say, having seen the interview on the ITV, you would have to be a heartless person not to feel sorry for her. She did a great job for Scotland during the COVID lockdown. I think she led the country through a terrible period, one of the most significant crises we've had since the Second World War. She led the country well through that. It clearly affected her deeply. I think I would have liked, though, to have seen a bit more contrition about the things that she didn't do right.
Okay, so that's two quite negative reviews. John, how are you feeling after reading the book?
Yeah, I mean, I think for anyone who's not read the book, we can save them a lot of time here. Alex Salmond was the baddie. I was the goodie. Everything I did was right. And I'm still a bit confused about what a woman is. It'd be a reasonable summation. I think the thing about this book is that in general, a book comes out and then they make a film of it, and people say, well, the book was better. And in this case, we've kind of already watched the Nicola Sturgeon show live on TV over the last 10 years. And now she's written a book where she doesn't really reveal anything new. And so, it kind of feels like it was better on telly. I just don't really think there's much in the way of introspection in this book, and that's where it falls down. I think you're right. Like this, I mean, I thought that it was fascinating, this thing where she's, starting to try to, like she says, I felt worried that I couldn't go on live TV and just say, yes, I think Isla Bryson's a woman, because that would have been consistent. And, perhaps if you find yourself in that position, then you should reflect that maybe your initial logic was wrong. But rather than do that, she still seems even now to be kind of looking for a loophole and saying, we could exclude people that are double rapists, maybe single rapists should be allowed, maybe, this is absolute intellectually vacuous nonsense. And she still doesn't seem to have got a handle on that.
Probably rapists shouldn't be allowed to change gender after conviction.
Yeah, so it's absolute nonsense, and it belies a complete confusion and an inability to really reflect and accept when you've made a big mistake and you need to just completely change course. But of course, that's one of the things that politicians unfortunately struggle with. They tend to be good at using a lot of words to say not very much at all, and that's kind of feels like that's what this book is.
I was going to ask whether you thought we would still be talking about this, or whether the public would still be talking about this book in 3 months' time, but I think I can guess the answer to that being a resounding no.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, the fallout from it, I think, is going to be felt for a long time. And I think the Salmond Sturgeon sort of psychodrama that dominates the nationalist movement is still very much in place, whether or not both the protagonists are still there. I didn't mean there as in alive, but in the actual movement.
I think the Salmond thing, it just shows what a shame it is that Salmond never got to finish his own memoirs, because I think they would have been by far the superior read. I think he would have produced a book that probably had more to say about the state of the country and the state of society, whereas Sturgeon's book just talks about herself. I think Salmond would have put it into a bigger context. I'm told, I think he was working on them at the time of his death last year. Chris McCall previously told the Sunday Times that he was going to finish them, which, because then it obviously devalues the whole thing. So you don't know how much Salmond wrote, how much McCall added afterwards. So we don't know what state they're in. Yeah. And it's just such a shame that he probably the biggest figure of Scottish politics of the past 50 years never got to finish his memoirs.
I think he also would have disagreed, to put it mildly, with some of the assertions that Sturgeon made in the book, particularly around about the independence referendum and wider independence strategy. I know we have vested interest in this stuff, but I thought it was quite remarkable, some of the Sturgeon claims she made in it. One of which she put so much emphasis on the white paper on independence, which the Scottish government also obviously produced. I think it was 2013 it came out. supposedly to convince Scots to, to back independence. It was a bit of a flop. No one really remembers it, and I dare say, no one particularly cares about it in 2025. But Nicola Sturgeon was so keen in the book to point out that she had been in charge of it. She was largely the driving force behind it. But lo and behold, Alex Salmond didn't bother to read it, and he didn't get the facts right when it mattered. And God, what a terrible job he'd done. And he went away in Hong Kong on a junket rather than...
That's another thing. Again, there are claims in it that I just can't credit. I cannot credit that Salmond did not read the white paper. I just don't believe
it's difficult to. I mean, Alex Salmond, she says that the minute he got on the flight and started drinking the free champagne,
That's right.
he would have given up any intention to read. I don't think anyone really seriously thinks you could dislike Alex Salmond, but he was a guy that was across his brief.
Yes.
I think anyone that knew him knows that he would have both been drinking the champagne and reading the white paper.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was also other things she said that he told her in July 2014 that he planned to quit as First Minister if they lost the referendum. Obviously, that's exactly what then happened. Nicola Sturgeon says that she didn't believe that was credible at the time. I mean, I'm not convinced by that. And just a general sense of if only more people had listened to Nicola, then maybe the referendum could have been won. But I have to say that, the more time passes, the more the argument as it was set out at the time. She also said that the independence campaign just was not ready. They got a referendum, and then she says we were not prepared for the level of scrutiny that we were going to face, which I find quite incredible.
I think she makes a fair point. I think maybe our memories are playing tricks on us here because we all think of Salmond as a colossus that bestrode the Scottish political landscape. But I think he did have a rubbish referendum campaign.
He did botch that first TV debate, which
that
Nicola
TV debate
Sturgeon
was a
says,
disgrace. I mean, remember he was talking about aliens coming down from Mars and all the rest of it. It was an embarrassment. And I think Salmond did have a shocking campaign, really. And I think Sturgeon's maybe right that he's partly to blame for the failure of the Yes campaign. However, I'm not particularly sure that anyone within the Yes campaign had a particularly good time with it.
No.
I think Salmond drove support from the historic sort of 33 to the 45.
There was a swing. There was a swing, but I
think it's generally accepted it was a successful campaign that
wasn't
successful enough.
But when you look at the failings of it, in retrospect, it's apparent that those failings were, in fact, fatal flaws. The failure to say who's going to pay your pension, what the currency is going to be. Also, I think that terrible TV debate. I think a lot of that, in retrospect, I think it's okay for Nicola to say, you know what, Salmond was not that great in that referendum campaign.
If she was in charge of the campaign, she wrote the white paper. Salmond's errors on TV were generally defending the flaws in the white paper. Which, on currency and things.
Yeah. So your point is, I suppose, that Nicola should have predicted this scrutiny and actually came up with solutions for it. Yeah, that's true. And again, within the book, there's very little in the way of introspection.
No.
On her feelings in that regard, but that seems to be the theme of the
general
book.
failure. I can remember being at an event during the referendum campaign where Nicola Sturgeon clearly just didn't have a grasp on the currency options. I think they all failed to deliver a coherent message on that at the time, didn't they?
Yeah. She mentions in the book that Alex Salmond was so distraught by the currency plan that he considered dropping it entirely at a late moment, which Nicola Sturgeon says that her and John Swinney managed to convince him not to do that. But I mean, that was the absolute clangor of the campaign, really.
One thing, I mean, obviously, Salmond gets a lot of coverage in this book. John Swinney features a lot. There's one person we noticed barely gets a mention. Her successor, her anointed successor, Humza Yousaf, is only mentioned once.
And it's in a 2012 charity event, is that right?
She doesn't talk about him at all as First Minister.
I feel that, that is a glaring omission.
Can we talk about omissions for a minute as well?
Absolutely.
I've not counted, right? So I'm relying on someone else's figures here, not for the first time as a news editor. But there are 3 paragraphs apparently in this book about the drug death crisis.
Yeah, I think
3
that's
paragraphs about the death of thousands and thousands of Scottish people that she did nothing about. Nothing. And to cover that off in 3 paragraphs, even her editors, you think, would have turned around and said, Nicola, that's a bad look. You want to just bung in a few more. 0 paragraphs on the ferry scandal, which
Yeah.
cost the taxpayer an absolute fortune. More paragraphs, I'm led to believe, on her appearance on a US talk show. Now,
John Stewart show.
that's it. That's
Daily
it.
Show.
So,
I think there's also 4 separate mentions of Pat Kane in the book, just to put that in the context.
I mean, that should make any book be burned, shouldn't it? Any mention of Pat Kane, but 4 mentions. You know what I mean? Let's get it on a bonfire, right? But that's a joke. Not really. But yeah, I think these omissions to me say a lot about Nicola's wish to present herself as this heroic figure, and she has this amazing ability just to clearly disregard things that don't paint her in a great light. That's a major flaw in any human being, and particularly it's a terrible flaw in a politician.
John, do you think that there'll be, alluded to a little bit about there being blowback for a party? Has she done a disservice to the SNP and to John Swinney? Do you think Swinney will just be able to kind of ignore this and people will forget about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know that it'll have that huge an impact in the SNP going forward. As things move on, don't they? What Nicola Sturgeon did or didn't do in her political career almost it feels like it's already becoming a little bit irrelevant now. I think she wasn't taking any pot shots at John Swinney. No. I think that their fate will be the SNP's fate going forward will probably be decided by John Swinney rather than Nicola Sturgeon.
Yes, there is a possibility though, because Swinney does get a lot of mentions, that she might sort of put him into decisions that were made that he may in the future want to say, well, that was a previous government, and it's like, well, hang on, in Nicola Sturgeon's book, you were in the room when this was done. Yeah. I do think she's maybe put him into the picture a bit.
Yeah, there was a few points in the book where I thought, wow, it'd be great to know if she was really honest about telling the full story there. For example, the freeing of McGrachy from prison. She said, well, I wasn't looked into the conversations. That's probably one of the most interesting set pieces of politics of that era, but exactly what went on.
She said that the opposition could have brought down the government over it, which, I mean, that's quite a revelation.
So when John Swinney comes to write his own memoirs, do you think he will be having a go back and how many years that happens? Or
I think when John Swinney writes his memoirs, it'll be a right riveting read. I can tell you that, and we'll be glued to our seats.
And that's the quote that will go on the front cover.
As the Muppet said, I was glued to my seat, which is just as well I would have left hours ago.
Okay, well, we'll leave Nicola Sturgeon to one side for now. I'm sure we'll be talking about her on this podcast again in the future, but Ben, on the Daily Express, I'm sure you're a massive fan of JD Vance. You'll be looking forward to his imminent arrival in Scotland.
Where's your MAGA hat?
Yeah, I misplaced it. Yeah, last time I had it.
I think I mislaid it in the bin. Sorry.
Is that right? Yeah, JD Vance. I mean, the guy's on his holidays. Let's cut him a break. He's here with his wife and kids.
He's meeting Robert Jenrick. He's meeting Paul. He's meeting Farage, I believe.
He went fishing with the Foreign Secretary.
And the Home Secretary didn't have a licence for his rod and he's had to dob himself in.
Absolutely, David Lammy.
So
to be nice, and now he's getting paid a fine. He's going to have to pay. Yeah.
I mean, it's the same. I think I'm right to say it's the same estate that Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie stayed
when
at.
they were filming World War Z.
Yeah, so used to famous US visitors.
Right.
I think it's a bit after the Lord Mayor's show. Trump's been to town. We've had that spectacular, newsworthy story a minute Trump visit. I think Vance will be a lot more low key than that.
Although I'm told his motorcade is longer than the Prime Minister's. Yeah, and that when he goes to Prestwick down to his estate, he's going to have outriders for.
Is that longer than the Prime Minister's, but shorter than the President's? I would imagine.
The President's will definitely be the biggest.
There's a hierarchy here.
Yeah, you would. The size of the motorcade says a lot about a man. I would say.
Is that a bit weird though? The Trump administration, he's probably the most senior. Second, obviously, to the Donald, but we're coming over and meeting opposition politicians. I mean, is that not kind of interfering a bit with UK politics? I presume he's not going to be meeting Ash Reagan when he's up the road.
But he met both. He met Jenrick and Lammy. I mean, if anything, it's Kemi Badenoch who should be going, hang on a minute, why are you meeting the guy?
Nobody really wants to meet Kemi Badenoch these days, do they?
So one thing that can be said for him, at least there's a work ethic there. If you remember, his predecessor was practically anonymous in the job before she belatedly had to stand in as the candidate.
I mean, I can't imagine any Holyrood politicians are going to want to meet him.
Vance, no.
Russell Finlay might want to.
I think he would love the opportunity to boost his profile in any way possible, but I think I rate that as unlikely.
I just like the fact that he's hanging out in Dreghorn, to be honest. I hope he goes to the local chippy and that.
From, there's a nice link there as well.
That's
Yeah,
right,
He is an interesting character. He's obviously a clever guy. He's written this book, which was very highly regarded.
Hillbilly Elegy, it's a good book.
Then he seems to have, at some point, he's just decided that his ambition overrides everything. He'd compared Trump to Hitler, I think, but he's now transformed into a guy that when he got asked the other day who the 3 historic figures that he would want to have dinner with, one of them was Donald Trump.
Just on a semi-serious JD Vance point, though, I mean, people may have forgotten in March he gave a pretty incendiary speech in Munich where one of the things he said was basically, well, Europe, if you can think you can count on America for defence, have got another thing coming. But he also had this bizarre go at the issue of buffer zones around abortion clinics in Scotland, and basically said Scots are banned from praying in their own homes, which kind of, I mean, we could be charitable and say that he was, maybe misinterpreting that, but at the time struck me personally as being a bit of an outright fabrication. Do you think, maybe folk will remember that? Can we expect them to weigh in again on this?
The Greens remember it. Sorry for jumping in, but there is an element of truth in this. The legislation says if you've got your window open, if your prayers can be heard by someone attending an abortion clinic, you could be breaking the law, even if you're inside your own home. But you need to have the windows open. You need to be able to be.
Yeah,
he painted a picture where ordinary good Christian folk were having their doors battered down by Police Scotland to invade their house and stop them praying. When actually what the buffer zone legislation is rightly designed to do is stop an absolute bunch of Zoomers hurtling abuse at women as they go to get a medical practice.
They're just holding placards.
They are intimidating these women, and JD Vance was getting involved in something he knew nothing about. He should have shut his gob. And by the way, I hope some of these protesters who held these protests, and they weren't prayer vigils, they were protests designed to intimidate women going for abortions. I hope they do end up in jail, and they can pray in the jail if they want, as far as I'm concerned. And JD Vance getting involved in that whole nonsense, he ought to just butt out. In fact, Trump, Vance, the lot of them, all that American right-wing cadre, they really have no right to interfere in anything to do with Scottish or British politics. But, if Vance pops into the Daily Record office, we can
I think you've blown that interview.
Oh, no.
He's a guy that doesn't know anything about Scotland other than a couple of, memes that have flashed up in a
he does claim to be Scottish, doesn't he?
Scroll, and I doubt he's going to learn anything new staying at this 5-star resort in the Ayrshire.
Scots-Irish, looking at sort of 400 years.
Yeah.
Scots-Irish hillbilly. He's called himself.
Yeah. I mean, he does have an interesting past, and although he presents himself as this working class figure, he went to Yale, one of the obviously supreme US universities. He went there on a scholarship. He was schooled at Yale to sort of promote himself as this sort of this mythic figure, this hillbilly genius. And it's worked out. I mean, his story is fascinating. It's worked out for him.
I mean, do you think he's the next president?
I think he's definitely at the moment. Yeah, I think he's the heir apparent at the moment, unless one of Trump's sons decides they want to become the El Presidente.
Sufficient a final point.
Unless Trump wants to stay put.
Well, that's it.
You prefer to reread JD Vance's book ahead of Nicola Sturgeon's then?
Well, I liked Hillbilly Elegy. I have to confess, I thought it was a pretty decent read. I've only got some way through Sturgeon's, and I might not finish it.
Well, on that ringing endorsement, we'll draw things to close. So thanks very much to Ben, John and Mark for joining me. And I'm obliged to say that you can listen to this episode of Planet Holyrood on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Watch it on the Daily Record YouTube channel. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram our TikTok for the latest news and the best bits of the podcast. So that's all from me this week. I'm sure Paul will be back next week, and it's bye just now.
Bye-bye.
We will never turn our back on a single Scot.
We've got to wrestle with those challenges.
This is the same nonsense we have heard time and time again.
This is our country. Let's fix it together.